Welcome to Feldy. Now get your butt out there and start farming.
Ah, yes, welcome indeed to Feldy. I always love hearing Farmer Yip welcome us to his map. Nice little detail that he put in here. We are almost done with planting, and let me just cycle out to our machines. Actually, I'll just start right here, and we are putting in barley, and like I say, it's our final field. We are in field number 28. Let me just zoom out a little bit. This is kind of in the area of fields where we hope to have some cash crops. We've never grown anything in here before, and actually what I'm seeing, and it's part of the field, and you can kind of see it across the edge, there is remnants of stubble from something. You know, I thought this field over here was fully cultivated, and it turns out that it really wasn't. So, oops. But that's all right. We'll make the best of it, and I think it'll still grow a crop. Yeah, there you can kind of see. And you know what? I'm probably the one that did it, that put that in there, because I was tinkering with some of the crops and making sure they appeared with their distance textures okay, and I used these big circles, tried to pick a big field in order to do all that testing in, and I think it was in this one here, so it's my own fault that there are remnants in there of all of that. So hopefully the version that any of you would download from ModHoster wouldn't have that extra bit of corruption. There's a little bit right ahead. Oh, when we get this harvested, or as soon as it starts growing, I have a feeling it'll clear all that off, or at least ways I hope it does. If it doesn't, well, we're going to have a very interesting looking field up here. We have just this one little bit left, and then we have the entire Feldy estate, farm, whatever you call it, fully planted, and for the most part fertilized too. You know, I've been pleased that it was just a happen chance. I didn't know how much fertilizer it would take to do all this, and as it turns out, I'm going to basically use up the amount that I had prepared. So, which I believe was just a little over 60,000 liters. So note to anybody trying this map, if you ever want to plant all the fields, kind of like I'm doing here, to have a season, know that you'll need approximately 62,000 liters of fertilizer. One last little bit. And you know, I've only done a handful of episodes on planting. I guess figuring that most people wouldn't want to sit through watching a bunch of planting. And kind of the other part is I have this terrible cold. Probably shouldn't even be recording now, but it just so happened to land in planting season, so tried to spare everybody the worst of it. And my goodness, we are done. That feels good. Yes, he will drive through. Yeah, there's just a bunch of stubble here. Well, we just planted through it, so I am hoping that as it grows that it will replace whatever's in there. But I guess we will see. I'll maybe park this over here temporarily. get it turned around so I can come out. I don't like just driving over where we planted. Alright, let me... Oh, I went the wrong way. Oh, yes, let's take a look at this. Even after fixing and changing the growth times of the crops, look at this. You know, this is all stuff that I planted earlier. It is already up and thriving. This was on the first day of planting. So you see, it really doesn't take very long to grow something, and the whole place is just a hop, step, and jump away from harvesting in. So, yep, and we're down here, the lowest portion of the map. Got a fine field of canola coming there, already in the flowering state. But up here, we just finished planting, and we have 3,600 liters of fertilizer left. And whatever's left is what I'm going to put on the fields. We'll do our best. Please hold your nose as I do this. This is some horrible driving, but it's the only way I can think of to get this out. And some of these, this fortunately has somewhat of a verge or edge on the border of the field, but a lot of our fields don't really have much of a border at all, and you're kind of off in a ditch, you're off in some area that you really don't want to be, and I've had this thing just bouncing all over the place trying to get fertilizer on our fields. But I'll just be thankful if it lasts so we can get most of the field fertilized. And I don't know, maybe it'll do all of it for all I know. We will see. And you know, coming up on this edge, I'm going to have difficulty. Well, maybe there is a little bit of a verge. I don't want to hit that fence. I know it's a hard object. Okay, maybe it's up. Okay, I seem to have more room on this side of the fence than I did on the other. I planted a crop just to the left, and as you can see, there isn't as much space. Yeah, it kind of narrows up here. Maybe I have to try to come back around and try to clean some of these edges up. Just one of the most unique fertilizer spreaders that I've used in here. Oh, look at that. Woo, turn off. Yeah, some of those posts. Let me just come down here. I don't want to waste what precious little bit I have left. I do have another 1,000 liters down there, I believe, but I have to leave it there in order to keep the silica rock area open. But I suppose if we had to get it, we would get it. And I was kind of thinking I would maybe do some work down there over near the quarry while I'm waiting for all the crops to grow. And honestly, once they're ready to harvest, I probably could just start cycling through them, even though they're not all ready, because by the time I get to them, they will be ready. And you know, I've tinkered with this fertilizer spreader, trying to make it a little less floppy, and I just don't know enough to know how to do it. I did give it a little bit more weight or more mass, if you will. Yeah, there's an area I probably need to clean up. So I think it is a little more stable, kind of taking the corners, but it still is plenty floppy, kind of like everybody saw when I tangled with the fence up there. Yeah, it just hardly wants to. Well, actually, it's doing pretty well at the moment. But it's definitely unique. No question about it. Or at least I think it is. Maybe you all have seen different styles of fertilizer spreaders before. I've never seen one like this. I'm down to 3%. I don't know if I'm going to pull this. Oh, 2%. I don't know if I'm going to pull this off or not. So some of the field may end up being left unfertilized. We'll just have to see. Here as we get kind of towards the end of it. And obviously I'm way in the hole. I started with a little cash in the bank, I don't even remember how much, prior to starting the replant, and I kind of let it go versus borrowing to cover it, because I basically wanted to see a barometer of, you know, how much does it cost to replant all the fields. And of course that gives me some of the information, but it's going to be dependent upon what kinds of crops I put in the ground too. I think potatoes takes a lot more seed, for example, and so forth. And all I know, probably my biggest input in the replant has been fuel. Oh, get over. Oop. Yeah, this thing is still just a little touchy trying to steer. It's going to leave a few skips, but that's okay. In real life, there'd be a few skip spots too, probably even with GPS. I don't know that anybody's at perfect. Oh, we're down to 1% net. Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to make it. Even though I'm trying to be careful and use it up just bit by bit. Which is kind of a bummer. So what I'm saying too is to replant the place basically is going to take $30,000-ish. And like I say, most of it was spent just in fuel. Like I explained in a previous video, this fertilizer spreader is just a monster in fuel consumption when it's full. When it has a full-on 50,000 liters in it, it is a very heavy trailer, and I've got that mod in here that just mows down the fuel when you're pulling something heavy. Oh, so close. That's so far. Most of the field will indeed have fertilizer. And that's all she wrote. Now let me try something here I'm curious about. I'm obviously out, but I have this TSL trailer up here, and I'm really curious to see if it'll let me buy a little bit of fertilizer. So let's see, I think I gotta go on the other side. Boy, that's very, very close. Remarkably close, just for straight up pure dumb luck. Alright, let's go help me set out my... Now I believe these are bags of fertilizer as well as seed on there, so I'm gonna see if it will allow me to purchase some fertilizer, because why not? So far nothing. Yeah, nada. And you know, I wonder if what that is it's, let me see if it's popping in the air. Nope. It probably, well, wait a minute. If I, five. Well, oh, interesting. Okay, so if I have that, what if I turn around? There was another Plato Lenyard. I still need to go in there and modify the description so I remember what they are. Maybe it'll let me, if I'm over here, if I open it, now will it let me buy some? No, it just didn't. Nope, I probably would need a different kind of fertilizer spreader, if at all, and it doesn't appear it's going to accept it. So I'm going to have to just live with it that we weren't able to get it fully fertilized, and you know what? That's okay. So now, oh my, it's just bucking around. Let me go. I have to think of where to put this. Probably want to just take it and go down to my lowest fields, down on the bottom of the map, which is kind of where I started. I think that's probably where I'll store it, because that is going to be the next place that I'll need it. If I do the same thing again, I planted the fields the same way that I harvested them, starting kind of at the southern peninsula and working my way north on the west side, and then coming back south on the east side. That's kind of what I did. Seemed to work okay. So I'll just assume I'm going to do that again. This is where I wish I had follow me in here, because sure would be handy to have those other vehicles follow me down here while I do this. So we'll see here in just a moment how our crops are coming. And straight ahead are potatoes, and you know what? Those things look ready to harvest, don't they? Oh, and here I wasn't paying attention. There's a fence post hiding right here in this hedge. So of course my equipment finds it. Well, if that isn't ready to harvest, it is very close. Maybe it... oh no, it's flowering. Nope, it isn't ready to harvest. I couldn't see the white flowers. So we'll have to wait a little bit before it's totally ready. And this is all flowering nice, and I think on the left is oilseed rape, OSR, and on the right is, let's just stop a moment. Look, are the flowers different? Oilseed rape. Okay. And this is canola. And I'm not seeing any difference, except it appears the oilseed rape is perhaps a little thicker with how Farmer Yip designed it. That's all right. Let's cut the corner here. You know, it's interesting playing this whole map. There was a lot of storage left kind of on the main farm, but I have to say I haven't really spent a whole lot of time on the main farm. Most of my time has been kind of in other locations, at least in terms of where items are stored. I think this is the only thing that comes back here, so let me just drop that. Won't need to use it for a while. I'll have more kelp I need to haul, and I'll get it hooked up there. Now, maybe let's hop out of game real quick. Just wanted to show something that I prepared. It is based on what we see in Farmer Yip's manual. You know, we have all these missions in here, all these different processes, you know, that he had for us. Let's see, where does it describe it? In here. You know, how to make biofuel, how to get water, fleece, fertilizer, bedding, and so forth. So we have all these processes, but what aren't defined clearly, except in a few instances, like you can see here, or in a couple of missions, you know, where it tells you how much corn, canola to put in to make biofuel. We don't have a definition in all cases. So what I decided to do was make my own. And so I kind of put them in here. I tried to sort it in a way that would make sense to me You know, if you start off with biofuel, probably the most precious of all the manufactured items that we need in the map, biofuel. You know, we need it in order to draw up water. We need it to create any of the fertilizer, some of the inputs for the fertilizer. We need it in order to grind up the feed for the cattle and the hogs. So in order to do that, we obviously need a ton of biofuel. So I showed all the plants or all the places where processes happen, show the inputs, how much of the inputs are needed, and then I show how long it takes in seconds. And most of them actually go pretty quickly. You know, 60 seconds obviously be a minute. So that's one way to gauge it. You know, making fertilizer would take the most time, but most of them are remarkably quick in terms of getting through a production cycle. You know, to draw up 100 liters of water takes half a minute, and so forth. You know, the eggs, interestingly enough, are something that take the second most amount of time of any of the production processes, basically 10 minutes to get 50 eggs. And so I tried to color code all of the inputs that come from other outputs. You know, there's going to be some other common inputs. Feed stuff, we may recall, we get that by picking up the windrows of red clover or peas or those kinds of things. So it's also needed. And then the rest are just regular commodities or bedding, like in this case is any kind of bale. And they have a bale converter, if you will, if you put it on there and it chews it up for you or chops it. And then chaff, there's even a chaff trigger on the farm to pick some of this up, or you can make your own in the field. But what I wanted to see was, and this is kind of, I was able to prove something that I suspect specific to creating fertilizer. For whatever reason, farmer put in two ways of creating fertilizer. One by getting kelp out of the ocean, and the other by producing it by mining rock and so forth. And so this is really simple for the kelp. We're right down by the kelp beds. It's a short haul. We bring it up the air. It's an even shorter haul for the biofuel, which is in the factory right next to it. And then you look at fertilizer production out of the mine. So first you have to haul 10,000 of rock. I think that those traders haul 20,000. You need 10,000 of silica, which by the way is produced from rock and also takes biofuel. And you need to haul it water, and you need to haul it biofuel to produce 10,000 liters of fertilizer. Now, I can't say I really like the ratios that they're using in here, or that for me have set this up. You know, it's similar 50-50, if you will. You know, you take your kelp, you're going to basically knock it in half for the output. So you look here, if you say silica and rock are roughly the same, well, you're going to knock it in half to get your fertilizer. But it isn't quite that way, because, I mean, the ratios are even worse, because in order to get silica, you start with 1,000 rock and you knock it in half. So this one is already knocked in half. It's worse, it's a lower rate of return, if you will, just on the input materials. Plus, the cost in terms of biofuel is higher. You have the direct input of biofuel, but it also took biofuel to produce silica and the water. And what I did over here, I did some math, did the formula. I determined that for kelp, the cost in biofuel was 10 cents per unit. When I look at the cost in terms of biofuel for regular or mined fertilizer production, it is 16 cents by the time you factor in all of the inputs and so forth. Plus, I mean, this not only is the rate of return less on the raw inputs or for the materials, it's really no different. This here, you mine it out of the earth. This here, you mine it out of the ocean, and it's closer. You just back the old trailer up, you pick up the kelp. Here, you back the trailer up, you pick up the rock. But it takes more processes, more hauling to get kind of the same result. Maybe by having a bigger number here, it looks like a better option. But I think what this has proven for me is that kelp is simply a much better bang for the buck. Now, possibly what could have helped with this, and I may still change it. One would think if you're doing something in much larger quantities, in bulk, something that is more established as a form of production, and I'm assuming that kelp fertilizer isn't as established as other means of fertilizer manufacture. Well, one would assume in the case of more established that you would have a lower cost per unit, at least if you're casting this in terms of biofuel, than you would in something like this. So one thought I had was to bump up, if you put in 40,000 of rock and got, or let me just leave it this alone. Let's say 10 and 10, let's say you ended up getting 20,000 of fertilizer out. Well, you take your cost and you divide it in half. And so if this was a result, even just this change here, that the inputs gave you straight into the output, now it starts to become a little more attractive and makes a little more sense. But that isn't how Farmer Yip set it up, so I'm just going to leave it there for the moment. But I kind of assembled the data, and I wanted to see to do a little planning, if you will, to see how much I needed, especially in terms of fertilizer. Now, where there is no planning is, how much fleece do I want to produce? Well, the fleece I'm taking to market. So I make as much of this as I'd like, and then I just go make money. Ditto with pig and cattle and egg production. And towards that, by the way, as I start looking this next go around and doing more with the animals, I started exploring, this is in the map editor, to see kind of how Farmer Yip set things up. And oh, my voice sounds just horrible. I'm sorry. Get just a little more room. So I'm really not sure how this is going to work. I'm pretty sure we can purchase cattle for a dairy. Here we see that there's the dairy tanks. I know somewhere hiding in here is a little trigger to pick up the milk, and it's going to take all that milk, and I think there's another little trigger somewhere in here for the dairy. This is a dairy. That is built in to Farming Sim 11 proper. So all Farmer Yip would have had to do is bring in the requisite pieces, establish where the cattle are going to roam, and he would have all that in there. But what he also put in here was 3 other types of animals. Hogs are up here, and so you put in the feed right here. It gives you all the inputs, and then the outputs, which are going to be in the form of hogs, are going to come from a trigger right in here. Real simple. So I say real simple. You got to put in pig feed, bedding, and water. I believe those are the inputs. Yeah. Pig feed, bedding, and water, and you get the output of pigs. And it's similar for the cattle down over here, where, let me see if I get the trigger. You put in cattle feed, bedding, and water, and it's going to output cattle. And I think in the cattle's case, we get the finished cattle over here. Can't really see the trigger, but I know you back your trailer in here, and that's where you pick them up. Now, The thing with the cattle is there are some other things going on that we're going to have to figure out. And it interfaces with the dairy that's already in the game. You may recall with the base game for Farming Sim, I think you fed them chaff or grass, dry grass maybe. And so you put that in a trough, and I think there isn't a trough, but if I just found it. Here's a feeding trough trigger, and it says grass, dry grass. There's another shed over here, and there's all sorts of triggers in here. Like here's just one of them, chaff and grass. So this one takes chaff and grass. Over here was dry grass and grass, but I think there's a trigger here sitting right in there, chaff. Chaff only. So anyway, there's triggers literally all over the place to take, I'm assuming for the dairy, but only time is going to tell. In his notes in the manual, oh, well, that's interesting. Hold on a second. Yep. This trigger is up in the air, so maybe it isn't as accessible. And, you know, there's some other things I found that appear to be possible errors. You know, he has all of these. Oops. Well, now, where is this one here? Feeding trough trigger. Feeding trough trigger would be for the dairy. So he has them in his manual. He has all of these highlighted. So you could either dump it in over here, kind of at this clamp. You could bring it in here in the aisleway, or you could dump it over here. There goes the bell. But like I was saying, I was wondering if some of these were set up incorrectly. Now, to the player, it may not make any difference. If you never use these over here, you maybe don't care, but let me show you what I mean. If you can read this on your screen, it says fleece. And there's like 5 triggers that have fleece. So in other words, you could feed your cattle wool, and it apparently would help them make milk. Well, of course, that probably isn't what Farming Yip intended. So we may end up changing those to be like the others, you know, which are grass and dry grass. But there's also another curious little trigger in here. Let me see if I can find it. And it's right over here. A very curious location. This isn't an area where you would feed it, and it has everything in the kitchen sink in it. Grass, dry grass, cattle feed, pig feed, food stuff, bedding, pigs, fleas, eggs, stone, all the way down to dosh. I think I even saw on there. I haven't a clue what this trigger is for, but I suspect Farmer Yip probably had it in there for testing purposes. So we'll maybe eliminate it at some point or just ignore it. But anyway, there's all these things here to explore now that we have all the crops replanted. And I'm looking forward to doing some animals this next go around and seeing kind of how that part of the map works. But I think before I record another episode, I need to let my cold get over so I don't sound so totally trashy. But thank you for coming along for this video here. Hope you're enjoying Feldy as much as I am. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.